Good morning. Thank you so much, Mercedes and Rodney, for that introduction. As you can see, I am actually live and on location at a Chase Bank branch in the Crenshaw district. As you know, Greenlining works with financial institutions, and today we are opening up additional financial resources here in the community. Proud to be a Greenlining co-chair and one of the founding members of the Greenlining Alumni Academy Association, to all my fellow founders out there. So let's just say for today, I have the privilege of being able to introduce our next speaker. The board of directors is so excited about today's event and yesterday's activities and want us to congratulate Debbie and the staff on the success. As we kick off day 2, Greenlining Summit, we will be leaning into our theme on galvanizing the next wave of change. We'll be hearing from leaders of you, as you've heard, who dare to push for bold solutions to establish a true multiracial democracy where all communities can thrive. And our next speaker, who I'm introducing, is no exception. You all know, after the election of the formidable Vice President Kamala Harris, Governor Gavin Newsom made 2 historic appointments. Then Secretary of State Alex Padilla was appointed by Newsom to fill Harris's seat. And our next speaker, Dr. Shirley Nash Weber, was sworn in as California's first Black Secretary of State. She is the only 5th African American in history to serve in a state constitutional officer position here in California. And we're talking 170 years, y'all. Dr. Weber was born to sharecroppers in Hope, Arkansas during the segregationist Jim Crow era. Her father left Arkansas after being threatened by a lynch mob who did not have the opportunity to vote until he was 30 years old. Her grandfather never voted before the historic Voting Rights Act of 1965, which we know systematically oppressed Black communities from voting. Her family moved to California when Secretary Weber was 3 years old, and it was her family's experience in the Jim Crow South that has drove her activism and legislative work. She has fought to secure and expand civil rights for all Californians, including restoring voting rights for individuals who've completed their prison term. Having earned her BA, MA, PhD from UCLA, and all of that by age 26. A woman on a mission, before her appointment, Secretary Weber served 4 terms as an assembly member in California's 79th Assembly District. She's also served as chair, as well as a member of the San Diego Unified School District, and has served twice as a California elector and chairing the California College of Presidential Electors in December 2020. She was the first African American to serve as the chair of the Assembly Budget Committee and as a member of the standing committees on higher education, elections, budget, banking, and finance. From 2019 to 2020, she served as the California Legislative Black Caucus chair. And Ms. Weber has set records during her tenure in the State House, garnering extraordinary support for all of the CLBC's efforts and projects. So to really round this out, as you can see, Dr. Weber's genuine passion and tireless commitment for equality and fairness in all sectors of life have resulted in her pursuit of reforms in education and criminal justice. Her equity-oriented legislative work has included everything from school finance, accountability, law enforcement's use of force and body camera practices, reparations, affirmative action, restorative justice, racial profiling, just to name a few. And you can see why we invited her here to be part of today's discussion. With her barrier-breaking and fearless pursuit of bold policies, we could not think of a better speaker to open our day. Please welcome me and joining. Please join me in welcoming Secretary Weber to the main stage. Secretary Weber, take it away.
Thank you. And let me applaud Greenline for the work that you've done. It's been amazing to be able to work with you and to watch your growth and development, which is so important to African Americans and to all of California. I'm honored and humbled to be here. You know, I'm a kid from South Central LA, you know, raised in the Pueblos, the projects of Los Angeles. And despite whatever challenges my family faced in its early days, I was still surrounded by a tremendous amount of love and support, not only from my family, my parents and grandparents who were in California at the time, the ones who were here, but also from my church and my community and people who just believed in me, that I was a smart little girl and needed all of their love and help and support. I was a student at Holmes Avenue Elementary School, and some of Holmes Avenue still stands today, and I've seen some of the teachers. And, the thing that was interesting is that some may have looked at it and said, wow, that's kind of a difficult situation because number one, you're in the projects. And number two, all your teachers are Black, except for one. We had one white teacher. And it was interesting that they were all Black, but they were all from Mississippi and Texas and Alabama who had come to California for this different life out of Jim Crow. And they understood the power of discrimination. They understood the power of education. They understood what we needed to do as African-American young people. And so despite the fact that I was in the projects in a school that was 100% Black, I never saw a white student in my school ever. It was a powerful experience because it taught me a lot about myself, and it gave me the power and the strength and role models and others to move forward. So I feel very blessed in those ways that people may look at it and say, wow, that was a difficult struggle. Yet it was a blessed struggle. My parents came from Hope, Arkansas, as pointed out. And, it was my dad left Arkansas because they were going to kill him. He was an African-American man who stood up for himself. And I really didn't understand the power of that until I got older and began to really study history and realized that my dad was born a year before the Elaine riot in Arkansas. And it's interesting because the riot in Elaine, Arkansas, the race riot, was the worst in U.S. history. And it's not recorded, but it was the worst. It was where people literally hunted down African Americans in fields and countries and killed them and lynched them because Black people wanted to organize. And they wanted to organize a union for their labor, and they were terrorized. And so my father comes out of this environment where people had been terrorized immensely, and his father was very, very terrorized. Is my dad's father, and yet despite that, my father believed that he deserved the kind of respect and dignity for his labor and his work, and he fought back, and he became a liability. My brother, who was 10 at the time, talked about how my dad was a liability at the way station because he went there and he argued with them because he knew what he had earned and they did not want to give it to him. So surely he had become a liability, and so he had to flee Arkansas to save himself and his father and brothers and sisters, and left us there only with the reality that he would send for us in a few months, and he did. And we came to California, but it was a terrorizing period. And it's interesting because despite that, you would think that he would be very, very afraid. We went to Arkansas every 4 years rather, and to face my dad's accusers and to let them know that he was still alive and that he was unafraid. And he taught us that you have to stand up for yourself. But he equally taught us the power of education, that he had been denied an opportunity, denied a chance to be there, to be a person. And as a result of that, taught that to us in so many ways. And so I look at my life and people say, wow, I remind myself somehow of poets who said, I hope nobody ever write about me because they think I was really, that my life was really poor and without. And yet at the same time, I was really quite happy in the environment in which I existed because of the kind of love and support and the opportunities and the challenges that were given to me, that even in the greatest challenge of attending UCLA, my family was there 24/7. Brothers and sisters, everybody was there to make sure that I was going to succeed because they believed in family and unity, and that was extremely important. So I come into this work with a tremendous amount of gratitude. It's interesting. I walked past a store on Vernon, and I think it may have been Hoover, and it was interesting. It always said, "Never forget from whence you've come." And there was a big picture of Africa when I was going to Manual Arts High School. I saw this big picture of Africa every day, and I really didn't understand it, but I remember the picture, and I remember the statement, "Never forget from whence you've come." And that was embedded in my mind as a teenager walking down the street. Sometimes we put signs up. We have no idea that young people read them and pay attention. But I remember that sign, and no one ever talked to me about it. But it stuck in my heart and my spirit that never forget from whence you've come. And I think if we as African Americans understand mindset and realize that every generation is investing in us and counting on us to basically not forget them, to stand tall. And so so everywhere I went, there were countless numbers of Black folks who always said, you know, you are our hope and dream, as Maya Angelou had said. You know, you're going to be somebody someday. You're going to lift us up. You're going to do these things. And so I just felt always that that this was what we were going to do. And so I thought it was extremely important that we do that, that I do that at San Diego State University when we founded Africana Studies. That despite whatever sacrifices I thought I had to make for my career, I was going to basically fight that battle because I knew just how important ethnic studies was. And I knew this was a moment in time where people had to sacrifice. And I had colleagues tell me, you don't want to do this because this is career ending. Take this opportunity to get into university and then leave. Others left the department and went into other departments. They didn't believe we could establish an ethnic studies and Africana studies department of any significance. And they felt it was career ending. And I thought, you know, it's such lack of vision on the part of so many individuals. And yet I had realized that it was a Black faculty, a Black person, Malefi Asante, who really reached out to me at UCLA, the only one faculty that reached out to me and lifted me up to become a PhD student and a university professor. And so so I didn't see this as career ending. I saw it as my responsibility to open this door, to knock it down, to make it happen. And that's what we see right now. And that's why I say so often to folks, Black people have to stay organized. We don't get organized. We have to stay organized. That it is not it's not necessary that we look around and say, oh, well, let's take a break and we don't have to meet. We don't have to be there. We have to stay organized because it is very clear from our history that they are going to come for us. It's whether it's in the morning or the evening, they are coming for us at some point. And we have to stay organized so we can support those who have supported us, that we can stand firm on those issues. You know, I spent all of my life in San Diego State working on behalf of Africana Studies, sometimes delaying my tenure, sometimes delaying my promotion, but knew that it would eventually come. And it did, because the community was going to demand it and the work that I was doing was going to be validated. But it became important that we stay organized, that we stay focused, that we don't start and stop and move on to something else, because we need to basically have the kind of support that is a lasting and ever giving kind of support. And it's for that reason when I look at my legislation and I did the things that I did, whether it's dealing with issues of lethal force in terms of 392 and changing the narrative in California so much so that now I'm seeing other cities take the base that we have given them as 392 in terms of when you can use lethal force and when you should not, and basically use that as a foundation to move forward. People took 953, the racial profiling bill that people thought would never get passed, and began to use that data to see how African Americans are being targeted more than anyone else for misdemeanors and all kinds of other issues that are there. And more recently, our 3121, the reparations bill that I got passed from California, first state to ever do reparations. People go like, how are you going to do reparations in California? California had slaves. California participated in the slave process. California owes African Americans, and many have started this journey and didn't complete it. We're going to complete the journey. We're going to make sure that those issues that are critical to African Americans are there. And so I say this because as I have taken these steps, I have taken these bold steps. The significant piece of it is people say, weren't you afraid? Weren't you concerned? And rest assured, when we did 392, I understand that law enforcement spent over $1 million trying to destroy my credibility, trying to attack me. They always try to find somebody to run against me. And even when I became Secretary of State and my daughter has run for my position, they attacked her. They spent money on her. And she won soundly in the primary and not have to go to the general election to replace my seat in the assembly. But I say to people, you know, all the time, I said, you're not afraid if you have a community. If you have a community that you're fighting for, that believes in you, that is supportive of you, whether it's a community of social justice, whether it's a community of people of color or women, and you have that community, you have the power that you need to make change. And if you stand up and you're courageous and refuse to bend, refuse to give in, you will win. You will win in the end because the community will embrace you. And that's what's so important. And that's why I say that Greenlining and all the social justice organizations, you know, that are there, we need to know that you need to know that there's someone counting on you, so that when they take that stand, that you stand with them. and that you stand firmly for them, not just at the moment, but throughout. When I did 392, it was interesting. It was such a volatile piece of legislation and so groundbreaking, not only for California, but across the nation. ACLU took out ads in newspapers to support me. They took out ads, full-page ads saying, "Thank you, Shirley Weber," across the state in San Francisco, San Diego, all around. And it was interesting because that fueled people's thinking about what I had done. And in less than a couple of months, the Union Tribune, one of our main newspaper in San Diego, our more conservative newspaper, called me, named me the San Diegan of the Year. And mainly because of 392, because of my ability to get this legislation passed. And so what happened is that there became a hedge around me, a protection around me that allowed me to keep going. And so it is extremely important that those of you who are talking about what direction are you going to go, that we take advantage of, yes, of this next wave, but recognize that there has to be another wave and another wave and another wave, that you must stay organized, you must stay persistent, and you need to support those who are standing out there on the line for you each and every day. If you don't, they will unless they just they may not be as courageous as I was, or I should say as crazy as I was, but some of them will get weak and some of them will be afraid and there will be attacks. And this whole issue right now in Secretary of State, the whole issue of reparations and the attack on, not reparations, excuse me, but on recalls and the attacks on the governor, the attacks on members of the Board of Supervisors, the attacks on registrar of voters, all of these attacks are efforts to try to put fear in others, put fear in them that in many of us that we should not take these stands. I want you to know that you need to stand firm. You need to stand firm because you cannot allow any of us to fall. Because if any of us fall, then others will see it and become afraid. And that's one of the reasons why when I was dealing with 392, I was so persistent. I was pushing so hard. I was not giving in because you know what? I said, if I fall, if I give up, if I lose, then no one else will try it again. And so I want to thank you for having me here with you today. This is a wonderful experience. You've got a tremendous challenge ahead. But keep in mind always, as I have always kept in mind, as I wrap up, as I always keep in mind, that I am probably not as courageous as my daddy, who fought in an environment that didn't have support of his back. I'm not as courageous as my daddy because my daddy took those stands. And if he had fallen, no one would ever know his name. They would at least know my name. And so it is important that we recognize that the folks that we stand on, even though they may not have accomplished everything we want, have given us such a solid foundation, a vision of the future. When I get ready to take a stand, I think of John Lewis standing on that bridge in Selma. I think about the fact that he didn't know what was on the other side, but he knew it was important to stand. And I want you to continue to recognize the fact that the legacy of us in this country for 400 years is that everyone has tried to break us, to destroy us, to eliminate us, and they've never been able to do it. And mainly because we have stayed organized, we have stayed focused, we have believed in ourselves and our God and the power that lies within us. And with that, we will win. And we're in unique times that require very different strategies, very different recommendations, and bold ideas. And believe it or not, it is now time for us to do that. I want to thank you for having me. I congratulate you on all the work you've done for over the years. And I wish you well as you continue this conference. Remember, I'm Shirley Weber. I'm in Sacramento. I'm representing you at the Secretary of State, but I'm always, always a social justice advocate and an advocate for equity throughout the state of California and this nation. Thank you for having me with you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Weber, for your visionary and inspirational remarks. We are so grateful to you for your service, for your leadership, for blazing the trail, for making history, for everything that you do here in California and around the country. You are a treasure, and we are just so appreciative for you for being here this morning. We're also looking forward to continue to work with you in your new role.